It's Inappropriate Characters.
Hello and welcome to Inappropriate Characters. This is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords, and I'm here with Venger and Grim Jim as usual. And this is our last show of the year, so we're going to be looking at summing up some of the things that have happened, and we're going to also talk about some of the last controversies in the gaming field this year.
Because that seems to be our thing.
Sorry?
That seems to be our thing.
Yeah, basically. That's what we're for, you know, the intellectual dark web of the RPG world. So basically the big controversy, I think, that's been happening this last little while in the gaming world is that we had Stacy Delorcano, who's was the founder really of the Contessa online gaming convention for women. Well, not for women, women run. That has made a declaration calling for the boycotting of GaryCon. And GaryCon, for anybody watching who doesn't know, is it's a convention that has been held on a yearly basis, sometime shortly after the death of Gary Gygax. I believe it's organized by the Gygax family, and it's held, in Wisconsin there. And it's a big event for the OSR, right? We'll get to that in a second, Venger. We'll get to that because I want to mention this.
Wisconsin.
Yeah. So it's a very important con as far as the OSR is concerned, because really it is the OSR's big con, right? I mean, certainly Gen Con isn't. And Delorfano's calling for the boycotting of it because this year they had invited Bill Webb as a guest of honor. Bill Webb is a designer from Frog God Games, an important OSR company, publishing company. And allegedly, Bill Webb had done some kind of, inappropriate harassment of a woman at some point, apparently related to Paizo in some way. Jessica Price at least felt she had to claim that or something along those lines. Again, I don't know if that's true or not. Certainly in this day and age, I don't want to assume it's true, but I'm not saying it's not true, right? But there, show me the evidence, right? Show me some kind of proof, because the days are now long past, as far as I'm concerned, where we're going to blacklist someone because of an allegation with no actual, foundation to back it. But the real thing that struck me is that Stacy Delorfano got a real boost from the OSR in the very early days of the Contessa event, right? That they put together, and this was a situation where in the very first Contessa event, you had almost all of the kind of the progressive left groups of the role-playing hobby not supporting Contessa. They had kind of condemned Contessa. Why? Because Stacy had set it up so it was all about gaming. It was women running the games, women and men playing the games, and there was no there was nothing but gaming there. And so a lot of the online feminists claimed that this was really problematic because it suggested that women could just play RPGs. How dare we? How could that be possible? It's just, that sends the wrong message. The message has to be that women are incapable of playing RPGs because of toxic masculinity, and any woman-centered con, this is a big problem. And they didn't get the support that they wanted, except that the OSR largely backed this, right? And the RPG site, for example, was one of the first big sites, and myself, one of the first big names that said, yeah, I think this is a great idea. I support this, right? So, you know, this is kind of a stab in the back, right? And furthermore, Frog God Games gave Stacy a job. They did one of their editions of Swords and Wizardry was done by a team that I believe Stacy put together. Third edition, that's right. And if not, Stacy was a part of this team anyways, that did all the layout and the art and everything. And so they went out of their way to promote Stacy and what Stacy does, right? And then we get this. Now, besides this, on Stacy's social media, they were they were saying posts basically saying that the OSR is full of, oh my God, alt-right Nazis. Once again, unable to point to a single person or product that is actually, you know, of the alt-right. And that the OSR as an idea is over, the OSR is dead, we should stop using the term OSR, we have to invent some new term, and all sorts of stuff like this, right? So this was just an all-around shitting on of the OSR, and Gary Con as an extension of that.
Wasn't there an early sign, though, that Stacy's whole thing, her whole vibe, her shtick was just, like, not right? Like, there was something fundamentally, I mean, not anything about keeping women from gaming, because I don't want to be a gatekeeper, and I don't think anyone should be, because everybody should be able to play whatever they want, and with whoever they want. But there was just some sort of, like, militant, like, bad feminism vibe that I constantly got off of her, and I don't know, it's just, I don't know if it was the things she said or the things she didn't say, but yeah, a lot of people gave her a lot of credence and a lot of leeway, and kind of maybe looked the other way when she said something that seemed kind of fucked up. I mean, you know, if Hitler wants to Sudetenland, okay, fine. But once he invades Poland, no, you have to stop him there, or else he keeps taking and he keeps taking and he keeps taking, and he moves the goalpost, and all of a sudden, you know, it's World War II. So people like that, not just the social justice warriors, but anyone who comes in guns blazing and wants a revolution and wants to do things a whole new way, and they're like, they have these people behind them, and they're just like going full force with their agenda. You know, people are eventually going to get in their way, and those people, in their mind, have to be stopped. And they do that, you know, through the usual channels, by character assassination and harassment and deplatforming and all this other bullshit. So I kind of saw this coming like years ago, and finally, you know, then Tenkar kind of realized, like, whoa, this bitch is whack. And now I think everybody else is caught up and saw.
I did not notice this at first, because I had good interactions with Stacy. Stacy was happy that the RPG site was supporting the first Contessa, and you know, I thought that the emphasis on actual play instead of, you know, panel discussions and things like that was a really good sign. But I think that somewhere along the way, probably a lot earlier than I noticed, because after that I didn't pay all that much attention. I was just like, yeah, okay, that's fine. So I stopped thinking about it. But obviously somewhere along the way, the whole concept changed, right? And yeah, now it's pretty obvious that there's, you know, that it's a serious issue there. And you know what you say, Bill Webb chose to withdraw as a guest of honor.
Right.
And Stacy went and did a post saying that's not enough. It's not acceptable. We still have to boycott Gary Con. We still have to destroy Bill Webb's career. We still have to oppose all of this.
It's never enough.
No, it's never enough. Bill paid the Dane Geld and discovered that, you know, it's when you do that, you never stop paying, right? So
yeah, the Vikings keep coming back.
I don't know if Bill Webb was actually a harasser or not. I'm not going to comment one way or the other, but he was definitely wrong for having backed down at this moment, you know.
I did some investigation today, figuring that we would be talking about this. So it all seems to trace back to an event now. I think it was PaizoCon in 2017, where he was self-admittedly piss drunk and did something inappropriate, but it's not exactly clear what he did, how bad it was, to what extent it was bad, and it does seem to have been dealt with. Whatever he did, he was followed around, he was prevented from doing anything else, he was told off, he admitted wrongdoing, and I can't find any evidence of him having done anything else other than being drunk at conventions, which is par for the course of British conventions. I don't know what it's like at American conventions. I know they're a bit more flighty about alcohol in some ways.
Well, it is well, if you're not drinking a beer, you're pretty much not doing it right.
Yeah. But yeah, so he seems to have done something, a year ago, more than a year ago. And now it seems that the punishment must be perpetual. I mean, I don't know how bad it was because it was all dealt with through back channels and so on.
Let's clarify, though, that it wasn't, obviously it wasn't anything that got criminal charges filed.
No.
It wasn't, right. He didn't rape someone, right?
No.
It was probably that he was drunk and said something inappropriate, right?
Yeah.
See,
I think that alone would have been, that's not good, but
it is good.
That much of an issue. But I think then some security guard or some con personnel at PaizoCon tried to intervene once he saw this interaction go south. And I think at one point Bill Webb laid a hand on him to some degree. And I think that's where it kind of snowballed into now it's an incident, and now it's all about Bill Webb and Frog God Games, and for a couple of months, it was he got rolled into the Me Too movement with role playing games.
Okay, so he acted like an ass, right? We can all agree on that. But now Stacey Delorfano is acting like an ass, right?
Oh yes,
and all of this gang behind Stacey that are acting like asses.
But the good news is that a lot of people, and she said it, she admitted it on her own website, a lot of people that she thought were behind her, that she thought were her friends or her comrades, are actively criticizing her and saying, no, we're not behind this, and we're not going to support this boycott or try to continue to ruin this guy's life perpetually. And they're sickened by it. Some of them, it's disgusting. And they realize it. They want no part of it, which is awesome. And so a lot of people on her own side are telling Stacey, nope, you've gone too far. This is crazy. Leave this guy alone. Leave Gary Con alone. You're doing more damage.
Yeah.
I think Stacey didn't realize.
Feminist, role-playing thing.
Stacey didn't realize that age is starting to pass now, thank goodness. And it'll be interesting to see who shows up. Specifically, from what I understand, Mike Merles is supposed to be there at GaryCon. He'd done a tweet some time ago before the call for a boycott, saying that he was going to be there, or implying that he was going to be there. And since that time has not said anything, as far as I know, saying that he's not going to be there. Right. So that's something I'm going to find to be interesting. But I've heard a rumor that there's someone else who's going to be there that'll be pretty interesting too, which is Venger Satanis. Is that true? Are you going to be at GaryCon?
That is true. I am officially going to be there. I actually, I brought up the whole issue with Stacey and her boycott to my wife, and she's like, you know what? If you really want to go, we'll find a way. And so normally
you have an awesome wife, man.
Yeah, she is awesome. I mean, she is. I got lucky with the parole officer.
Aside from not letting you stay up past your bedtime, but
but normally I would come sort of during the middle, and I would stay to the end. But this time, because I'd be at work Thursday and Friday anyway. So I'm going Thursday morning, after the kids go off to school, and I'll be there through early Saturday afternoon, and I'll just come home before dinner so I can help put the kids to bed and get everything organized. So yeah, I'll be there Thursday, Friday, and like a good portion of Saturday. So I'm excited. I'm going to be able to go, and that's awesome. I've already signed up for games, like running games. So, and they've been approved already.
Great.
Who wants to join in?
What are you running?
Alpha Blue, of course. But also I've been working on Chult, which is my science fantasy post-apocalyptic campaign setting, Mega Dungeon and everything. And instead of doing my own thing for that, I kind of want more of a neutral and like majority type OSR D&D game. So
you mean
I'm running Wizardry, and the other I'm doing just 5th edition. So I elected not to do Crimson Dragon Slayer, which I would normally do, just because I don't want to focus on Crimson, like the system. I want to focus on like how it runs, how it would run normally for like 90% of people that would buy this.
Right. Well, that's how it worked for Dark Albion as a product, right? It's a system neutral product, and it worked well. So, but you've got it lucky because you're on the right continent. Myself and Grim are not.
It's actually like just under an hour and a half away drive.
Oh, that's really close for you.
It's very,
well,
very
for me,
convenient.
it would be about 14 hours or so, I think. But I've already said
I'll start swimming now.
That's a long haul.
I've said on my YouTube channel, and I'll repeat it here, that if there's any group of guys that want to set up a GoFundMe or something like that, if they raise the funds for me to travel there, then I will go and I will be there at GaryCon. But you know, I'm not going to do it myself. But if there's somebody out there that really, really wants to have both Venger and the pundit there, then I'm on board. And I don't know about Grim Jim. I'm not going to speak for him, but yeah, it would be quite interesting to have inappropriate characters live at GaryCon.
It's kind of ironic, this whole GaryCon thing, because you know, there is some fire behind the smoke when it comes to the accusations against Webb, however overblown and overplayed they've been. But it's here where a lot of people seem to have drawn a line in the sand and said no more. Yeah. One thing I really resent about things like this, about people like Stacey, is that they've made me hyper skeptical of these kind of accusations.
Yeah,
because there's been so many that are bullshit, or when you drill down and find out what actually happened, it's virtually nothing. And this has happened so often in so many different spheres that now when someone gets accused of something, my first instinct is not, oh my god, how terrible, we should do something about this. It's really,
yeah, that's the worst possible effect of all of this, which is that because it's been politicized, now you can't by default assume that an accusation has some kind of validity, right? You have to you need to see some serious evidence, because there's been so many cases where it hadn't, right? Like right during the Kavanaugh hearings, right? Never mind the lack of evidence there, right? But during the same time those hearings were taking place, you had a case going on, I think it was in California, where you had 5 girls that falsely accused a guy. They were all teenagers, they were all in high school. They falsely accused him of sexual assault. He ended up spending time in a youth detention facility and then later under house arrest with an ankle bracelet. His education was ruined, his career prospects were ruined. And then eventually their claim unraveled, and they all admitted that they lied because they just didn't like him. He was just weird. So they decided to make up this story about him, right? And so like, we're supposed to destroy people's careers on the basis of absolutely believing these claims at a time when we see cases where these claims are, directly, if not outright lies, then sometimes they're incidents that don't merit the level of destroying someone's entire life for it.
Yeah, I mean, you should always be skeptical.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, you should always be skeptical. You should always ask for evidence. But even so, in these previous cases, you had a certain amount of trust in people and faith in the community that people wouldn't make accusations that didn't really amount to anything. And now that trust has gone out the window. It's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that, people don't believe women. Well,
I think especially when it's obvious that the person being accused, it's not always that, because I mean this high school kid is a perfect example of when it wasn't that, but when you have a situation where the person being accused is someone that has some sort of a position of importance, be it in a tiny subculture like the OSR or in a very significant sense like Kavanaugh, right? Where you look at it and you say, well, okay, now is there any chance that this is real, or is this somebody doing this as a political weapon to destroy someone that is an ideological opponent? Like it makes it all the more harder, right? Which is a big, big problem, because sometimes people who are in positions of great power, if they're the ones that are abusing that power, they most need to be held to account, right? So like that's even worse, because it used to be that you'd think, well, we need to take this really, really seriously when it's a case like this. But now when you get somebody who's, very clearly a target of the political left, that makes it incredibly hard to believe it, right? Just because we know that this has been done so many times before.
Yeah, and it's such a serious accusation. It's going nuclear when you accuse someone of something like that. And to disempower it in this way is just...
and the unfortunate side effect is that it's no longer being nuclear, right? Like eventually, this problem of consistently, making stuff up or crying wolf or whatever you want to call it is leading to the part where, sooner or later there's going to be this accusation and at least 50% of the people are going to say, well, I just don't believe it. Sorry.
It's bad enough that accusations of racism no longer have the weight they once did. Accusations of sexism don't. Calling someone alt-right is now essentially meaningless. Calling someone a Nazi is meaningless.
It's practically meaningless. And that's horrible. Speaking as someone who had, great-grandparents that died in Nazi camps, right? That's the thing that pisses me off the most about what has, what's been done by this group of assholes,
They've taken what appears to be a single incident with one guy a year ago and used that to try and organize a mass boycott of an event that involves lots of people. How does that figure?
Well, collective guilt, right? Like, I love the fact that they can't point to a single person in the OSR or a single product in the OSR that is actually part of the extreme right or something like that, right? That's especially not, an alt-right Nazi book or a racist book or something like that, right? And so they don't have any real basis for this, but they just want to be able to create this sense of collective condemnation because they've realized that the OSR is uncontrollable, right? And so they want to change it into some new thing that they have direct control over,
like they did with the indie scene previously.
Yeah. Well, anything more to say about this? I guess
nothing else, Benji?
We're going to see you on. I guess we're going to see or hear from you at GaryCon, Benji. I hope you have a good time. And well, you never know. If not this year, maybe next year there'll be more than one of us there.
Not hearing you, Venture. Your sound's gone.
How's that?
That's better.
Okay. I had it on mute because I was coughing a little bit earlier, and then I think I unmuted it, and then I wasn't sure, and I muted it again. Anyway, what happens? Gen Con. Are you guys? Have you ever gone to Gen Con? Either of you?
Not in the US.
No, never gone to Gen Con.
Okay, I haven't been.
I don't think I would go, but
Well, maybe someday we can all go to Gen Con. That'd be cool.
Yeah. It take some advanced planning to get me anywhere on a plane.
Well, we would probably all get kicked out of Gen Con as soon as we went through the door.
We'd have to make alternate plans like months before. Like, this is the offsite. Like, anti-Gen
Con. Have to create a separate location,
in case we get kicked out, which we probably will.
Yeah.
Anti-Gen Con is actually a really good name for a con.
Yeah.
Our special guest could be Jeremy Hambley.
Yeah. Yeah. We'd create the alternative Gen Con.
Yeah.
All right. So the next topic was about the end of the year. And So I believe that Venger wanted to talk about what he saw as the highlights of 2018. And we're also going to talk about, after that, our predictions for 2019. I don't know if you guys are looking at the chat, but someone just said that Grim is the B.A. Baracus of our group.
Yeah, pretty much.
We need more gold chains.
Yeah. All right, Venger,
many Norse things.
I pity the fool.
Take over, Venger, and tell us about what you thought was the highlights of 2018.
Okay. Well, you guys can jump in too. I mean, I don't want to.
Well, start us off.
Stamp on, but there were a lot of Kickstarters, I guess.
True.
What's the castles and or strongholds and followers? Did that come out? That Kickstarter that topped over like 2 million or something? Did that come out in 2018?
I believe so. I don't know. I'm not sure, to be honest.
I don't know. I just saw that.
I've never had a Kickstarter, and I've never backed a Kickstarter. I'll admit that.
There's so many. Kickstarter's huge, and even though I've been doing it for a long time, so this is in a week or two when I start Chalt, it'll probably be like my 16th. But mine are very, very modest. Maybe I'll make $3,000, maybe $4,000. The 5 is probably my tops.
It works.
A lot of people, sometimes their first one, it's like Patrick Stewart with the False Machine guy. He's got Sleeping Titans, I think, is one that's he started weeks ago, and I think that's like 50,000. I mean, Kickstarter is huge for a lot of Zach Smith. I know he's a favorite of everybody's here. His Demon City, that did really well like a couple months ago.
Yeah.
I don't know what that was, if that was 50,000 or not. Lamentations of the Flame Princess seems to be doing really well, except for the misstep where apologizing for the Jordan Peele.
How dare he take a picture with Canada's greatest intellectual?
Yeah. What else? I've had some good things going. I just tore through a whole bunch of Alpha Blue material. I think I did like 3 Kickstarters in a row for Alpha Blue, like different supplements and adventures and things like that. So that was a highlight for me.
It sounds to me like you didn't really think through this list ahead of time.
No, to be honest. Like, things will just come to me, and then other people will add on, or maybe.
All right. Well, to me,
group chat. Like I've never seen anyone chatting. I don't have the right thing or technology or app.
Well, so far, none of the audience has contributed their ideas of what they think is the.
You bastards.
But I'm going to name one, which is I think it had a good things and bad things that happened, but it's definitely something that happened in 2018, which was that D&D exploded back into like mainstream culture, right? And it just had a huge burst that you could see all over, social media for starters, of activity, which includes a lot of stuff that I personally think is not great, but you still have to think that a rising tide helps all boats, right? And there's certainly a beneficial side to the fact that D&D is really, really big again now.
Are you talking about like celebrities, or are you talking about like
not just
celebrities, or
I'm talking about, of course I'm talking about stuff like the live streams and things like that, but apparently the sales of D&D have been spectacular. Right. But I'm also talking about the fact that you see now, which 2 or 3 years ago you didn't see, all these accounts, like mainly for me it's on Twitter, but I imagine it's the same on Facebook and other social media. But just if you do a search for D&D, you see all of these posts of very young people who are clearly new gamers talking about their game, showing pictures of their characters, doing all sorts of stuff, right? There's all kinds of channels that have come up, including Inappropriate Characters, about D&D and all sorts of stuff that has made a big a big impact in terms of the growth of D&D, and it's a visible impact that isn't just e-celebrities, but it's also like a bottom-up sort of thing, which I know that, you know, it's probably a bit of a fad, and some of these teenagers that are getting totally into D&D now, just like in the last time it was a fad, are not going to stick around in, you know, 2 or 3 years, but a lot of them will, and that's good. We've got a couple of comments from the audience here now. Kevin DeJordy says, the best thing of 2018, Matt Mercer telling everyone, believe Whammon blindly or your brain damaged. Direct quote there. And Unscripted and Unchained says, 2018, we have seen pushback on SJW intrusion in our hobby. So that's true. That's a good sign.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been fooled before thinking there's been about to be a reversal, but it does feel like something's happening, especially in the wake of all this GaryCon stuff. I know some people are talking about setting up alternative awards in a similar way to the Sad Puppies did for the Hugos.
Versus
versus the what is it? I can't even remember. That's how little importance the awards.
Ennies or the Diana Jones
Ennies. Yeah, as an alternative to those. So that will be interesting, and that does seem to have sort of kicked off this year. What worries me though is you just end up with two parallel industries, one way over to the left, one possibly way over to the right, and never the twain shall meet. And I don't think that's particularly healthy. I think that's what's gone wrong with Comicsgate to an extent. Rather than correcting for the problems that the far left activists have created, they've created a whole new set of over to the right problems, rather than just addressing those issues and making good comics necessarily. Though that is happening as well. So I'm just a note of caution, I guess.
I think that's a possibility. I mean, it's certainly something that could happen. With Comicsgate, that happened to a certain amount because of kind of right-wing entryism on the part of Vox Day, who was not a comic guy and decided to be one just to, you know, piss off the left or whatever, right?
Own the libs.
I have not yet seen, I mean, I will tell you as soon as I see it, an RPG product that is overtly right-wing, you know, like there are RPG products that the left might call right-wing. You know, they might claim that Lion and Dragon is right-wing because, you know, it presents medieval setting as what it really was like in the Middle Ages, you know, but including things like monotheism, my God. But
there be girls with machine guns with blue hair or else.
Yeah. Well, Alpha Blue people might say, is sexist or whatever, right? But I think that, you know, right now what we have is we have some products that are overtly left-wing, not many. We have a lot of products in the kind of mainstream that have been co-opted by the SJWs, including D&D, where what you get is still a product that is not really a left-wing product, but that has a bunch of left-wing kind of notes and propaganda and virtue signaling in it to try to appeal to the progressive crowd. And then you have a bunch of games that are politically incorrect without really being, you know, I haven't seen any that like is a, you know, I haven't seen any that is like a secretly pro-Trump message or something like that, right? That hasn't happened. You know? Maybe it could happen. I'm not denying that there's that risk, right? There's that possibility. But so far it hasn't happened, fortunately. So any other highlights of the past year? Or should we move on to questions?
Well, highlights and lowlights, I guess. So we got a new edition of Warhammer, which is pretty good.
Yes.
It's a couple of mildly broken rules, but I look forward to seeing whether it succeeds or not. All the fuss around Vampire is probably worth touching on.
Yeah.
I thought they were actually doing something fairly interesting. I didn't agree with all the choices and so on, but they were kind of pushing the boat out, doing something a bit different, taking a few risks, being edgy in a way like they used to in like first and second edition. But they got this enormous unhinged backlash accusing them of being secret Hitler or something behind the scenes and hiding messages and so on. And stupidly, the backing company took this all to heart, has reorganized, got rid of everyone, and it seems like Modiphius is taking over. And I got nothing against Modiphius. but they're not particularly edgy. They're not particularly cool. They make good workman-like games.
Middle of the road stuff.
Yeah, I've got nothing against them. I think they're great people. Enjoy some of their games. I backed their Barsoom game, though I think they went a bit tame on the art, same as they did with Conan. Yeah, but they're just not who you want necessarily doing Vampire. I mean, they may farm it out to other people to develop. I mean, it's all up in the air, but it just shows the power that this outrage culture can have if it can completely derail, a kind of second-tier product like Vampire that still has so much cultural cachet and has always been edgy.
Was sales plummeting? Was that one of the reasons, or they were just like, and they just wanted to pass?
The stuff that happened around the Anarch and Camarilla book about Chechnya and so on, that seems to have been the final. Fuck it, we're getting too much backlash for what is a niche industry, I guess, compared to their computer games. So
some of that could generate sales, but if it had such a negative impact that sales were half of what they expected, I can see why they were jumping ship. But if they didn't give it any time at all, and they were just like, "This is a hot potato. I don't know what's going to happen."
You just panicked.
Short-sighted. I mean, it's actually proof that we expected sales to be this, and they were 50% of what we expected. Then I would expect that, but I mean, I don't know.
The real problem is that now, if they do farm it out, Grim, they're not going to farm it out to the people that were developing it before. They're going to farm it out to the whole, what are they called? The guys who did the previous edition of Vampire. Ran it into the ground, right? Because those are the progressive team, that are just gonna, do the same garbage, and it's gonna be a flop.
Yeah, it's just weird. I mean, Vampire and Son was always edgy, always made missteps and mistakes and other things that worked really well.
And jokes.
But they were always a very right-on company, but a bit too much for me.
The World of Darkness in the 90s, if you were a pretentious college liberal, that was your game, right? That was the game you loved, right? Oh, because, the werewolves are environmentalists and magic is all about special artist people who are fighting against evil businessmen.
And all the pronouns in the book are female and
Yeah. So that was the game de rigueur for, champagne leftists, or college leftists, whatever you want to call it, right? And now we've gotten to the point where that is a Nazi game, right? That's a game that is not allowed.
That just shows how much of a shift there's been. And you've also got to remember that the 90s was the last time political correctness hit its peak. Yeah. And Vampire was considered mostly acceptable in that atmosphere. So how bad things have gotten. Ugh.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. We've got, we've got good new games. Like Warhammer went back for inspiration to the kind of first edition, which was good. I think we're seeing a lot of that kind of. I think that's why the OSR continues to bloom, is because people going back to their roots with lessons they've learned on the way and revising things in that way, rather than completely deconstructing and tearing things down, which isn't productive.
Yeah. So, I think prediction for 2019, my first one, I guess, would be that just like in 2018, the OSR continued to do really well and be on the vanguard of game design. It's in 2019, that's going to keep on happening, right? Because especially now, because you're going to have a bunch of people outside of the OSR who have now, rejected the OSR and what have you, that are the ones that are, about producing propagandistic games or stuff like that. And the people in the OSR are going to keep making, avant-garde sort of games that are about the games themselves and really interesting settings. And I hope that Venture will actually make a game that's a real OSR product again in 2019. And I know
OSR, buddy. Fourth wave.
I think that it's going to keep being a very important part of the RPG hobby, and it's going to keep being a very influential part, just because a lot, last year was more interesting than the year before, and so on. And I think next year is going to keep being more interesting in terms of people pushing the envelope of creating interesting stuff.
Yeah, I also think the OSR is going to light the way forward even more than 2018 and 2017. And hopefully a lot of people that are just getting into D&D will see the old school roots or see what new things that are, being introduced into the fantasy role-playing game culture. And they see like a lot of the great stuff is coming from the OSR, and they'll look deeper into that, and then they'll find a whole bunch of other awesomeness, and they'll see that there are many different ways to role play, but the old school way, is one of the best. I know I'm biased, and a lot of people are like, well, it's whatever people want, but people keep going back to the old stuff because a lot of times it's superior. That's just the way it is.
I don't know for sure if it's going to happen in 2019. It might not happen until 2020, but sooner or later, what's going to happen is that they're going to have a bunch of these kids who are into D&D now, 5th edition D&D, and that, they're all kind of big fans of stuff like Critical Role and stuff like that. And that style of play, that style of making a setting, and that way of making characters and all that sort of thing, that are going to get bored of that. And a bunch of them will probably just quit gaming, but a bunch of others will start looking at, well, what other stuff can we do with role-playing games? And that'll be very interesting, because some of them will go into stuff like the OSR, and then some of them might create other stuff that might be totally different, which will also be really interesting.
I'll tell you something I just thought of that's been a trend for a while, but particularly I think over the last couple of years, is boutique products. Things like Kickstarter and Patreon and others have loosened up a lot of cash and allowed a lot of people to make some really outstanding, beautiful, or sprawling products. I think the bottom will fall out of that eventually, but for the time being, you get some really nice coffee table books and props and box sets, things like that, and that's been interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it depends on the economy, but if it's done well, I think there's always a market for a real super niche, as you say, boutique, kind of lavish but expensive, exclusive kind of content or something. To buy.
Like is it Black Sun was one of the recent ones that comes with all kinds of cards and chits and in a big box.
Invisible Sun.
Invisible Sun, that's the one. Yeah, and Kingdom Death has apparently done pretty well, and that's hyper expensive. So the market's there if you can produce the product to that kind of level.
Yeah. Well, I've got a prediction that's a pretty safe one. In 2018, one of the things that happened is that Gareth Michael Skarka did not finish Far West, and I'm predicting that in 2019 he will also not finish Far West. And he dissed me the other day. I forget what, about how I didn't produce anything of worth or something like that, right? I want to point out that in this past year alone, my RPG Pundit Presents series has now reached issue 60, right?
Yeah.
One product a week for 60 weeks.
You trying to beat the great Vedra Satanis, you prolific bastard?
Well, look, I am pretty prolific here because each product is between, say, 6 to 30 pages long, right? So you do the math of how many pages I've managed to write in 1 year when Gareth Michael Skarka hasn't released Far West.
Yeah, I've got to get back in the saddle and stop producing stuff at a proper rate again. So
yeah,
hopefully now my financial situation and everything has settled down, I'll be able to concentrate on that.
Make another OSR game like Machinations of the Space Princess. That was fantastic.
I've got the companion planned for that, and I was going to do. It sounds counterintuitive and stupid, but I was going to do a fantasy version of that because things like the race mechanics and so on deserve to be available for a fantasy game. And talking of Skarka, I did have a very similar game concept for a kind of turning a Western into an Eastern, that I held off on doing because he was doing Far West. So yeah, fuck it, I'm going to do it. And it's shorter order than him, I'm sure.
Call it, I don't know, Wild East or something like that. You know?
That's what it was originally called. Literally, that was the working title when he announced this. But I changed the name to Setting Sun, so I'm gonna go with that.
With even a 5-year head start, I think you will beat him.
Yeah,
probably
because he has a 5-year head start on you, but you'll probably win.
I think it's closer to 7 now. I'm not sure, but I think it's like 7 years since this Kickstarter.
Yeah, I don't know. I used to get on with him. I used to get on with most people. I haven't changed, so I've got to wonder what's going on.
Yeah. Well,
the world's changed.
I'm just a hippie. I want to get on with everybody, but they make it so difficult.
Yeah, well, I don't know what it is about peace-loving guys like us that get into, that people get annoyed at them.
Shall we move on?
Well, any other predictions, or are we done there?
I'll tell you something I want to stop happening in the next year: novelty dice. Games that rely on novelty dice need to die in a fire.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I
think you're right. The dice, the novelty dice, I mean, DCC gets a pass because they kind of did it first.
And those are real dice, at least.
Yeah. And B, it's like there's a use for it. Like, if you want a number between 1 and 14, like that might happen. Like, you can use it. You don't have to use a D12 or D20,
Yeah. So all these dice with special markings and things. I understand why they do it, but
it's like it just feels like too much of a little kid's game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not really a board game guy, and I know for the last few years, board games have exploded. And everybody loves board games, and no matter where. Game store, game convention, no matter where I go, like there's shelves and aisles of board games and people are playing board games. I'm like, this would be 10 times more awesome if you were like killing orcs and fighting dragons and like trying to steal treasure chests of gold and magic wands and shit, and kicking peasants and talking to bar wenches. That's just so much better than a board game because, you get freedom of action and movement and immersion. And a board game, you're like, okay, I roll the dice, I take a card, I read it out, okay, I move 3 spaces. It just seems so, elementary.
A lot of the stuff they've produced recently is just, it's just kind of trash, right? Like it's just stuff that is obviously trying to get in on the board game boom, which is, I think that's something that's going to some extent decline this coming year because, I think in part because of the popularity of D&D, I think that you're going to see a lot of these, there's still going to be some really successful board games, but I think that the boom of quickly produced Kickstarter made board games is going to kind of, the bottom's going to fall out of it.
Yeah. I mean, indeed. I mean, if someone has 100 board games, I mean, can't play them all, or if you have a few dozen that are your favorites, like just do that. Like, what, you don't need another one next month, or I don't know. I don't get it.
And people are willing to spend so much more money on board games than they are RPGs.
Yeah. Right. I know some people that have
not fair.
I know some people have hundreds of them and don't play them ever. I understand. At least with an RPG book, you get a book, right? Like it's something that you'll probably look through and read, and I guess you could say there's some nominal value even in getting one of these fancy RPG books, even knowing that you're never going to play it, right? But buying a board game that you're never going to play, that's just kind of sad. It's like getting a puppy that you're never going to walk, or something like that.
I mean, if it comes with miniatures, especially if they're like cool Cthulhu miniatures or something. That's kind of neat.
Yeah. Zombicide's fun, and the fantasy version of Zombicide is a lot of fun, and you get a lot of zombies in the boxes. So it's almost worth it for that.
But the ones where you've got like the little tokens or the meeples or whatever, it's like, I don't know, it just seems like lame. But then I'm a role-playing game guy, so what do I know?
Yeah.
Somebody in the chat said, and then you have games like Diplomacy, which you play with 6 other people that you'll never want to see ever again after that.
I think Monopoly's worse than Diplomacy for that, just because it goes on and drags. Shall we move on then?
Right.
There's an elephant in the room, and its name is Patreon.
Yes, let's talk about Patreon. Do you want to kick us off there, Grim?
Okie dokie. So, a lot of creative communities, including the role-playing industry, including us, including YouTubers as well, have come to rely on Patreon, which allows plebs, such as our audience, to subscribe to people, for as little as a buck a month or whatever, and it aggregates that money and gives it to people. And the website also gives you a nice, easily editable front end, so you can limit certain content to certain people. You can provide bonus content. You can take questions, suggestions, and provide an extra service and things for people. Now, Patreon really came to prominence during the adpocalypse, which was when YouTube was really heavily hit because a handful of extremist videos had adverts on them, and there were a few hit pieces in the traditional media going after YouTube about this, and a load of big advertisers pulled out. Everyone's ad revenue on YouTube tanked. It became no longer viable. People's livings were ruined, and Patreon kind of filled in the gap. If you couldn't get the advertising revenue on YouTube, you could get some people from your audience to subscribe to you for some money. This isn't necessarily what they intended for Patreon. You can find the guy's TED talk about it. Basically, the idea was that this would make creative work more financially viable than it has been in a long time, due to piracy and all kinds of other issues. People expect to get stuff for free, but if you can get a certain percentage of your audience, 1,000 true fans used to be the way it was talked about, you could get a regular, reliable income for doing creative work that otherwise it's very hard to monetize. A lot of the people that got hit by the apocalypse were edgy comedians, political commentators, and so on, particularly ones to the right of the spectrum. They all ended up on Patreon, taking in money there from their subscribers. It's not what they intended, but they were making money hand over fist. Everything seemed to be going along fine. And then Patreon got hit by the hit pieces and so on. And a particularly prominent YouTuber called Sargon of Akkad was just summarily removed from Patreon. A lot of money was lost. I don't know how much he was making per month, but an independent center-left journalist, Tim Pool, his audience was affected because people started pulling out of Patreon in protest, and he's lost over $5,000 a month. I've lost about a quarter of what I was making on Patreon. It's not a lot in the first place, but that shows the kind of significance, and it's impacting people and impacting channels and creators that have nothing to do with the political sphere. And it's just a huge clusterfuck. It's an unjust censorship. He didn't violate the terms of service, and basically trust in Patreon has tanked. Loads of creators and subscribers are all pulling out of it. The interesting twist to all this is that there have been competitors in the past. They've been shut down by PayPal and MasterCard and Stripe refusing to process payments for them. And the same thing happened here. A new service was called Subscribestar. A load of people moved over there, started, getting their subscriptions on there away from Patreon. Sorry, this is taking quite a long time to explain. And then PayPal pulled out of them, Stripe pulled out of them, so they can't process the payments. So we've got a multi-tiered layer of censorship going on via financial services, and there's no real escape at the moment. A few people are talking about setting up alternatives, but if they can't get PayPal or Stripe or MasterCard or whoever else to play ball, there's just no way around it. So yeah,
is the account guy like that happened? Did that happen a week or two ago?
A couple of weeks ago. I mean, so Christmas has been in the way, so we don't really have any resolution to this. But the Patreon people have kept doubling down on their decision and continuing to misrepresent him. There's been a few hit pieces and so on. There's a transcript of a conversation with one of their trust and safety team that Matt Christensen, I think he's a YouTuber, center-right politics. He transcribed their conversation, and it's quite shocking, really, if you go and look at it. But there's just no alternatives yet.
Not yet, but
no.
Supposedly there's a video came out with Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson, who are two of the big figures of the intellectual dark web, who have been saying apparently Jordan Peterson had been kind of seeing this coming for a long time. And over the course of the past year, he's been trying to work on creating some kind of an alternative to Patreon that he claims will be immune to this sort of tactic. And he says that it will roll out sometime relatively soon. Dave Rubin has come on board with this. And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, when that happens, like I have a Patreon account, right? It's never been very supported. I think in part because maybe contrary to the audience that the two of you have, my audience is full of people who were suspicious of Patreon even before any of this happened, right? Like a lot of people who are kind of in the cultural libertarian camp, and especially if you're tending towards the right-wing side of the cultural libertarian camp, you start out looking at Patreon as having been this thing that hipsters invented, right? And so it's not your natural place to go. And then on top of that, you kind of were always suspecting that there was going to be this kind of nonsense that was going to come about. So I think a lot of the people that support me have supported me either by, I've had some people that have supported me on PayPal, on my blog. If you go to my blog, where therpgpundit.blogspot.com, I have a PayPal button that people can donate to. But also, a lot of them have supported me by purchasing product, right? Like the RPG Pundit Presents series kind of lends itself to that because the products range in price from like 99 cents to $2.99, right? And so I suspect that a lot of people who really like my stuff are just buying those games, those PDF products, as a way to to get something cool and also to kind of support me. And I encourage all of our viewers to do that. But even I've seen that even there, my Patreon account has seen a reduction, right? And I've already said on my channel that as soon as whatever it is that Peterson and Rubin are cooking up comes out, I'm going to switch to that, right? And I suspect a lot of other people will. And I guess we're going to have to see how immune it is to the sort of trickery that PayPal and MasterCard can pull off, right? And for how much longer this sort of thing is going to be tolerated, because it's basically what's going on right now is essentially a kind of racketeering, right? It's these big companies working together to help certain big internet companies kill their own competition, right? Which is, that's not capitalism. That's a trademark example of racketeering that, has to be stopped, right? And I think that if this sort of nonsense keeps going, then you're going to end up seeing some intervention, possibly by the U.S. government or in other ways, right? Because it's just
I'm not 100. I'm not certain of that because a lot of this started out from the government. This isn't a conspiracy theory. You can go and look it up. There was this thing undertaken by the US government called Operation Choke Point. And the idea was to attack black market and grey market transactions arms deals, drug deals, things like that. But almost immediately it overreached and it started attacking sex workers and so on. And it created this whole apparatus by which fiscal censorship can take place around the back door. Similar things have gone on in Europe, with the German government pressuring Facebook to censor certain content. It's not the government acting, so it's not considered censorship. It's considered, Facebook's terms of service or whatever. We say you can't put certain content on our platform, but it's the government behind the scenes. So I'd say it's more corporatism than cronyism, because there is this all going on. And adult workers have got it in the neck for some time. They were mass banned from Patreon, though a few cosplayers and so on have managed to sneak in under the wire. So,
hang on, I just want to. So I saw your video, Grim, on the Thoughts audit.
Yes,
which was good. I'd heard about it before, and to the point where it kept coming up. I was like, what is a THOT? I don't know what that is. So I did my Google search. I'm like, oh, that hole over there. Okay, that sounds reasonable, I guess. And I watched your video to get more up to date on what that is, and then I was so inspired by the concept and people talking about it, and then Grim's video that I made an Alpha Blue scenario called Thought Audit, which will soon be sequelized by the Thought Police, and probably will culminate in the third part of the trilogy. A credit for your thoughts.
I don't know what to make of this, but when some kind of political thing like this comes up, I make a rant on YouTube, and Venger goes and makes an Alpha Blue supplement.
That's how I deal with the bullshit.
Yeah,
just the flow of information. I just I try to do something easy and ridiculous with it, and that's how I get by and stay sane.
When I saw your product for the first time, I commented, "You magnificent bastard."
Yes. I am, of course.
I mean, this problem, cryptocurrency and the blockchain. It's.
Having said that, I should also go because my only lasts so long. So good night, Ben. Great show.
Take care. See you in the new year.
Yes, 2018 was good. 2019 will hopefully be even better. Tentacles crossed. And good show, guys. See ya.
Take care, man.
See you later. So,
just a sec. Now that Venger has left, in our chat, someone just commented, Venger Alpha Blue Satanist pretending not to know what a thought is the RPG highlight of 2018. I don't know. Venger is surprisingly innocent sometimes, so I think that...
He's a bit of a boomer.
Might have been pretending, my dude.
So I was saying, cryptocurrency and the blockchain, it's often been described as a solution in search of a problem. But here we may have found an actual use for it, the transfer of value that isn't reliant on PayPal and so on. The trouble is you've still got to turn it into real money. It's not easy or intuitive to use. It's got a bad reputation for good reasons. But if someone can make that more usable, that's the solution.
I was thinking the exact same thing, which is that what really needs to happen is that there needs to be some way to create a cryptocurrency that is easy enough for my mom to use it, that anybody can use, right? Not because right now it's like this weird thing. I mean, I wouldn't know how to use it, right? And I think the average person just would not. They'd be totally lost. They'd have no confidence in it, and they would find it too technically difficult to do, right? But if you could create like an app that does it in a really simple and straightforward way, and that has some way to convert it, as you say, to real money in an easy and straightforward way, that would change the whole game. And I'm sure that eventually it'll happen. It's just we need some kind of a genius to figure out how to do it in a way that, because I think the problem is too, there's this kind of culture around cryptocurrency of just like what happened in the early days of Linux, right? That there were people that were just about taking pride in the fact that the normies don't know how to do it, right? And like that's super complicated, right? So it means it's something that only the elites get to do, right? And I think that if we can get out of that mindset, that stupid idea, and make it into a something that is really for popular use, right? Then that'll be absolutely revolutionary, because suddenly we won't need the government to handle the economy. Like we'll be able to have a whole other economy that is uncontrollable. And that would be, to me, that would be as a anarcho-capitalist, that would be fantastic. Right?
I mean, I'm hardly a hapless techno weenie. I used to do tech support. I'm not the best, but I know my way around, and I just find the whole process intimidating and confusing, and run into choice paralysis all the time. Which coin, what wallet, how do I turn this back into real money? it's got to be as easy as what I currently do with my bank account. Log in there and send transfers and so on.
It has to at least be as easy as PayPal. If you can make it as easy as PayPal, then that'll change the whole game, right? And I think that the person that does that will be, he'll be famous forever. I mean, that's obviously in the long term. I think that's what has to happen. It's what's going to happen in some way. That, or the creation of alternative financial systems that are like an alternative to MasterCard, basically, that is dedicated to open commerce and not the politicization of commerce.
Yeah.
Because it's quite frightening. We're getting very close to the point where if a certain neo-Marxist social justice warrior decides that you shouldn't be able to have enough money to even buy food, then you're going to starve to death, right? Because they just don't want you to eat, right? And this is a huge problem. It's a huge problem.
You've read stuff, seen stuff about China's social credit system, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, that's a kind of centralized governmental way of creating this horrific dystopia. And like even beggars in the streets there use electronic payments. And if you end up with too much of a negative score, you get cut off from using your mobile phone to do payments, things like that. You basically get knocked off grid involuntarily. And we're getting to that point, and it hasn't needed a massive authoritarian pseudo-communist government to do it. Just social media and social pressure and activism is doing it.
A totalitarian pseudo-communist establishment to do it, which is what we have, right? We don't have that in government, but that's because government has become less important in some ways than the infiltration of certain corporations by people who utterly despise our entire system.
Yeah, but corporations, you used to be able to rely on them to be amoral and avaricious.
Yeah,
and you can't even rely on them to make purely capitalist decisions anymore.
Yeah, it's stunning, but I don't think that can last, right? Sooner or later, there'll be a market adjustment in that sense, right? That you're going to have inevitably people who will see that there's a market in that, right? And where it'll come from, I don't know. I hope that it'll come from a group of, libertarians who want to create economic freedom, and that it won't come necessarily from, say, narco traffickers or something like that, right? But if one group doesn't occupy that niche, another one will, and it might end up being the only alternative. I mean, I've seen some people talking about, the fact that if eventually you're going to have people going and doing, like, instead of going to YouTube to do their channels, their shitlord channels or what have you, they're going to go on Pornhub to do it, right? And it won't be porn. It's just that Pornhub will let you do it and YouTube won't, right? And that might end up being it. Pornhub might turn into the economic powerhouse of the free market because of that. You never know.
Yeah, everything seems to be kind of bifurcating. Like, you've got two science fiction fandoms now, each doing their own thing independently. We've got two streams of comic books, each doing their own thing, and possibly that happening in gaming. It's very, and now possibly in payment processing and things.
Well, I think that that's happening at every level of culture and society. You can point out that division. It's because essentially we're in the middle of a non-violent, for them, well, mostly non-violent civil war in the West. Like we're in a situation where you pretty much have to take a side because one group won't let you not take a side, right? So you're either going to go in line with the totalitarians or you're going to join the rebellion. It's one of the two, right? You don't have a choice.
And that's it. The split isn't left and right, even though people describe it that way. It's authoritarian, libertarian.
Yeah,
which is why people like us end up as such strange bedfellows
right.
in this culture war.
And stranger bedfellows still, right? Like you look at Peterson and Dave Rubin, right? Neither of them, I think, would have considered themselves to be right wing. Maybe Peterson considered himself to be right wing before Rubin did, but these were not guys who were traditional, William F. Buckley style conservatives. Neither of them were. In fact, there's a lot of the William F. Buckley crowd of neocons that are taking the side of the totalitarians, right? Because that's what they've always wanted, a strictly controlled technocratic society, right? And so if they have to fall in bed with the left to do it, they will, right? And so you are seeing this weird division. And of course, there might be more people on the right just because the impetus of the establishment has turned towards the kind of cultural neo-Marxist left that are taking the side of the rebellion, but it's certainly not absolute and exclusive either way, right? You're seeing a lot of people who used to call themselves liberals that don't call themselves liberals anymore, myself included, because of this sort of bullshit, right?
Yeah, I mean, Sam Harris is one of the biggest names so far that's pulled out of Patreon. He's massively liberal.
He's making an unbelievable amount of money from Patreon, right?
Yeah, and it's just yanked that. He makes enough money otherwise to be comfortable, and clearly a principled dude. But he's been under attack for a few years now, just for having the conversations.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
And reason-based opinions that are considered dangerous in modern society because truth isn't.
Oh, cut out again.
Hope that we're going to, if a viable alternative comes up soon, like I'm not like what I said on my channel, and I suppose it applies to Inappropriate Characters, is that we really are grateful for the support that anyone gives us on Patreon. We hope people will keep supporting us on Patreon for now. But second, as far as I'm concerned, the second that there is a viable alternative, whether it's Peterson's or somebody else's, I'm going to switch there with my channel. And I hope Inappropriate Characters will do the same,
I'm going to play it by ear. I've set up some direct subscriptions, but, we have to see how things shake down.
Yeah, I mean, Patreon, there's no question that Patreon has behaved incredibly unethically, right? And
and inconsistently.
I'm not in a position to say to people who want to support me, no, don't. I'm going to cut off this venue for you to support me right now. But as soon as there's an alternative, then yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are waiting on. So when there is an alternative, Patreon's going to take a massive hit.
They've already taken a big hit, right? Like there's like you said, there's tons of people who are creators that have nothing to do with politics at all that have seen a huge drop in supporters because there's people just dropping all support on Patreon because of this. And I totally understand that, and I'm not going to criticize anyone for doing that right now. I totally understand that. But I think that as soon as there's something else, that there's an alternative, you're going to see a bunch of creators who are hanging on right now out of necessity that are going to jump, and a whole bunch of supporters of Patreon that are going to jump with them, and then Patreon's going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, they've made all the wrong moves ever since this happened in the first place. I don't know if they can recover from it. I mean, they might be okay with all their normie transactions, but they have taken a massive hit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, anything else you wanted to finish up on, or are we good?
I want to wish all of our viewers a happy new year, and let's hope that 2018, was was a better year than the last, and I hope that 2019 will continue on that route, and that we're going to see more and more support for opposing the kind of nonsensical totalitarianism that had for a while really been indomitable, and that now is suddenly finding itself being challenged at pretty much every turn. So let's hope that continues. And the issue number 60 of RPG Pundit Presents has just come out, so please check out my RPG Pundit Presents series, and I'm sure you're going to find, if you're into the OSR or you like gonzo fantasy or medieval authentic fantasy, either way, you're going to find a lot of products out of those 60 I've come out with so far, and there's more to come. And you should check it out. And if you don't want to support us on Patreon, you can certainly support me there. And yeah, I guess that's it for me.
I'm finalizing my plans for next year, but we may be looking at Setting Sun and stuff I put off from last year for health and other reasons. But there'll be more Tales of Gore releases, and yeah, I'll be finalizing my plans. I am planning to do a regular streamed game. I know you won't care about that, Pundit, but possibly Warhammer. Haven't decided yet, but something. I did a couple of games this last year, and that was fun. I want to get back into playing more regularly than I otherwise do. So,
well, that's all we. I hope everyone plays more than they do right now, except me, because I'm playing about 14 hours a week, I think. but all
nice
of you who aren't getting enough play, and you've got to go and do some playing, because that's the whole point of the hobby, really.
Yeah. All right, I think we're done. So we'll see you all next time, approximately a month from now. We'll see how things go.
Do support
Happy
us
New Year to everyone.
If you want us to do more than one show a month.
Yes, and wherever we end up after Patreon. Yeah.
Currently smoking, near a billiard, plus what the hell am I smoking in it right now? Oh, Peterson Wild Atlantic. There we go.
All right. See you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.